Can one creator make an animated TV show all by himself? I believe so, and here is why. Hi, my name is David, and welcome to the GODZ vlog. What is GODZ? GODZ is a new animated series based on the ancient astronaut theory. It sort of like combines science fiction anime and UFO lore into one, kind of like different package. Maybe something we haven't really quite seen before. This vlog will be specifically about the GODZ series, GODZ novels, GODZ graphic novels, and I have like a couple other vlogs that I will be, you'll see below in the playlists. One of them is specifically about the anime, in general animation history, what's been going on in the industry right now. There's a lot of changes. And another vlog will be about the UFO paranormal subject. I've always been very, very much interested in UFOs, but it doesn't really seem to fit into the GODZ vlog because a lot of people, they're really only interested in the storylines, they're only interested in the series. They don't want to talk about the specific details of how animation is being made, what are the details behind the UFO cases, and so on and so on. So I figured it would be best to kind of split that up. So what I want to talk about here is basically this has been a hotly debated subject for a long, long time. What does it really take to make an animated movie or an animated series? And for a lot of long years, it was impossible to do anything on your own. It was really pretty much since the computer came into the picture that things gotten a little bit easier. Now Ralph Bakshi, he released a great video that was a talk of his. I think it was San Diego 2013, where he talks extensively about the influence of computers in the animation industry and how that has changed things and how difficult it was back at the time, to do things by hand. As a matter of fact, late in the 80s, I worked in a small animation studio here in Switzerland, and it was just me, a graphic designer, and a producer. And at the time, I was really big into anime, like all the Madhouse stuff. And I was like, wow, I can do that. Of course, I couldn't have back at the time, but I wanted to. In my head, I thought I could. And when I realized what it would take just with the cells and the cameras. At the time, we had like what's called an Oxbury camera. It's like this huge camera stand, basically. And we had to reshoot the take several times because of the mats stuff had to be blended in and blended out. And literally, you had to count frame by frame. And if you were just one frame off, you had to scrap the whole thing and restart from the beginning. So it would have been impossible to do anything on the level of like what I can do now, basically with the computer. Now, single animators doing their own shows is not really like a novelty. This has been around for a while. We even can go back in animation history in the 60s. Some people were doing their stuff basically. But in more modern history, basically, one of the examples that most commonly comes up is this guy. This is actually his second movie. I don't know if you can see his little reflection in the camera here. Shinkai. He became really, really famous basically with Your Name. Like a couple of years ago. And this is his second movie, actually. His very first movie, Voices of a Different... I think it was called Voices of a Distant Star, exactly, sorry. He did that all by himself. It was just him, basically, Photoshop and After Effects. And here with the second movie, what was it called? The Place Promised in Our Early Days. He actually did have a crew, but he still wrote it, produced it, directed it, and so on. And he was still very close to his vision. And that basically shows that it can be done, Voices of a Distant Star wasn't a long movie. I think it was a short one. It was like 15 or 20 minutes. So it's considered a short movie. It's not considered a feature film. But, it was in the early 2000s. I think it was 2003 or 2004. So, After Effects wasn't really up to speed. And, you didn't have like some of the other software that's available today. So that still was a pretty damn good effort. There's a couple American guys who tried similar things. One of them is Fred Perry. He did a thing called Gold Digger. Now that's based on a comic book series by Antarctic Press, and I think they released over like 300 issues at this point. He also wanted to do an animated series. Again, that was about 2003, 2004. He also used Photoshop and After Effects, and yeah, it's not the greatest thing of all time, but you know, he should be applauded for effort. Definitely, and it's not something I would watch every day, but it's kind of interesting. But again, you know, after about 2 episodes, he ran out of steam. And there was another guy in the early 2000s. He published a DVD called Peacemaker. There's a guy from Texas. I think his name was Eric Villa or something like that. And he was actually the first guy to really make use of particle effects in After Effects. I mean, he really used some nice plugins, and the whole stuff looked kind of interesting, but it was completely devoid of any animation. It was more like what we call an animatic with some nice particle effects to make it look like anime style. And the story was pretty borderline incoherent, which seems to be a big problem. You know, I mean, there's this other thing that's going on the internet right now of, I think, Misty Chronexia, whatever it's called. I just found out about this recently. Okay, nice effort and stuff like that, but, you know, people were really bashing it. At the end of the day, it really comes down to story. If you got nothing to say, you got nothing interesting to tell, it doesn't matter if it's well animated or if it's shittily animated. It really comes down to story, and that's kind of what I want to focus on with Sky Gods too. It's like really, the story has to click. If the story's no good, the story's not interesting, the character's not engaging, it doesn't matter how well drawn or how well animated it is. So basically, there's like 3 main things why it's being much easier these days, you know, to do something like this by yourself. Now, in Sky God's case, I plan to make this a 6 episode first season. Of course, big plans, but the episodes can be varying in length. I mean, it sort of depends on the kind of distribution and the kind of network that will be showing it, how long the episodes will be, and it sort of depends on the time and if any funding. You know, I don't really intend to do any Patreon nonsense and any Kickstarter or crowdfunding stuff. I really kind of want to keep this, yeah, not that I don't want people involved, it's just I don't want to feel like, you know, I need to do something to satisfy people. You know, I really want to do this basically, you know, completely commercially. Either make it work or it doesn't. Back to topic. 3 things basically why I think it could be a good possibility that this might be happening. First of all, you know, it's always the experience of the animator, director, producer. You know, I've been drawing professionally for 25 years now, every day, 12 hours. So my drawing is pretty good. You know, I'm not a genius, but, you know, it's work. You know, I've did it with work basically, and I've come to a level where I can say, okay, good, I'm satisfied with that. I think that works. This is good enough for what it is right now. I can really put this, you know, put in my hours every day, and I get stuff done. You know, that's very, very important. It's not that I have to think, oh, how do I draw this? I know it's problem solving. There's a solution for every problem. I know that I've done it millions of times. And if I'm confronted with something that I cannot fix or cannot work out, you know, I usually find a workaround. So I know I'm a workhorse when it comes to that. I can't get stuff done. And that's definitely a very important part. So if you're attempting this and you're like maybe 20 years old, it's got to be difficult because you just don't have the routine to pull something off like this, you know. And I think that was sort of a problem of the Misty Chronexia thing. There were some drawings that were actually quite good and some of the backgrounds were quite good, but then the whole thing sort of fell apart because I suppose those were young. I mean, with that kind of pay, you know, I can imagine this not being anybody older, but these were probably younger people who were working in that maybe early 20s. So you just saw like it just fell apart in that area. You know, just did not have the routine to pull this thing off. That's one of the things. And the second thing is definitely technology. You know, let's be honest. The computer has been a tremendous help and have really changed things quite dramatically. A lot of shows like these days that you see, for example, Ruby on Crunchyroll or Knights of Sidonia, the new Blame movie on Netflix, and so on. It would not be possible without computers. It's all 3D, cel-shaded stuff, basically. Personally, I'm not a fan of it. We can go into more detail what the problems and challenges are of the cel-shaded 3D things in the anime talk. I do want to talk about this because it's funny that Studio Trigger, they used some of the cel-shaded stuff in what is it called? Kill la Kill, exactly, and they explained where the problems were in comparison with the 2D cel-shaded stuff. And there's quite some details you might want to think of, and I think that's why it kind of never really looks right to me. I expect the pacing of a 2D film, but the 3D thing, it just never looks right to me, you know. So I will stay away from that. By the way, it's just really simply too technical for me. I don't get the 3D stuff yet. I'm gonna have to work on that, but that's down the road. But we have other software, for example. I mean, we have obviously the Adobe suite. You know, Photoshop will be used heavily. After Effects will be used heavily. I mean, those two, especially After Effects. I mean, it's a genius program. You can do just about anything with. But in terms of sheer anime, like frame-to-frame animation, it doesn't really help you. It's great for some rigging stuff, but even there, it's really do character animation stuff. It's tedious. You know, there's one piece of software that's really changed everything for me, basically, and that's like the Toon Boom thing. Now, Toon Boom goes way back. Has been sold about 3 or 4 times in between time. I remember Toon Boom like 25 years ago, when it was called US Animation. And at the time, it was like something that I could only dream of. It was completely unaffordable. So for those of you who don't remember Toon Boom 20 years ago, it would cost between $20,000 and $30,000. I think that's like one of those prices. It was incredibly expensive. You could really only afford it if you were like Disney or something like that. And then they were sold, and then I think it was called Opus for a while. Toon Boom Opus, and then they went through various incarnations. They had a product line of different types of products, and now I think for the last 2 years, a year and a half, it's become basically subscription based. It's like less than a year. A year ago, it's become subscription based. So the subscription for the Toon Boom Harmony is what used to be called Opus or US Animation, the big one basically. That cost you about $100 a month. So at this point, the entry barrier is so low that you know, you can just literally do anything. But of course, if you can't draw, you can't write a story, you can't do anything, you know, that will not do anything for you either. And Toon Boom is a fairly deep and fairly complex program. You know, it's not quite as extreme as After Effects maybe, but you can do a lot of things. So that has really opened a lot of possibilities for me, basically, in terms of like, you know, because I'm storyboarding and writing my own thing, it's sort of like I can really gauge where do I want to do frame by frame animation, where I want to do rigging, where I want to use like After Effects or like whatever, you know. So it's literally a decision that can be made on a frame by frame basis. Now, the average animation in Japan, anime TV show usually has between about 3,000 and 5,000 frames. I mean, that's just what's being given us. Of course, that's a big margin, you know, but this is basically what's being given. So I figure I probably can narrow that down to maybe about 1,500, 2,000 frames, and all of a sudden, actually, you know, we're in a ball game, you know, doing 2,000 pictures, you know, in a couple months. This is not the end of the world, you know. So we're basically within the ballpark of what is being possible. Of course, there's compositing that comes to it, you know, there's sounds, you know, go to the voices. The whole production part will also take a substantial amount of time. You should not forget that. But at least in terms of like affordability, the computer really has brought down the cost dramatically. So basically with the Adobe suite, which I have anyway, because I need it for my daily work, and the Toon Boom, which adds $100 to my overhead, once I have the time and availability, I can pretty much good to go. So that would, you know, I mean, obviously I have to pay voice actors and music and stuff like that. But even with that, you know, if you look at the average cost of an animated show is about, you know, 100, in Japan between 100 and 200,000, in the West between 250 and a million, you know, I think it's going to be a lot lower than that. The third part, very, very important, maybe even the most important part, distribution. Distribution has really opened up and been democratized over the last few years. You know, it used to be such that you could not get a TV show on TV until you convince somebody on a TV station buy your show. That would have to be based on some kind of a known property, like the He-Man thing. The stories of how He-Man was sold are essentially legendary, basically. And that it was the first syndicated show. But this is more like the exception. Usually TV buyers, I would have to say, are pretty conservative. You come to them with an idea like Sky Gods that has some really deep UFO lore, some pretty crazy ideas in it, they'll say like, who the hell is going to watch this? But of course, thanks to streaming and the internet, things have opened up quite a bit. And it's actually really become easier because aggregators will distribute your stuff to all the streaming networks. And of course, you can approach Netflix directly and say, hey, here's my stuff, which directly. You have to get an agent. You can't just approach Netflix as a producer. You need an agent, or you need an entertainment attorney who has the connections to a person at Netflix. It basically works like the traditional thing. The entry barriers are fairly high. There's a lot of people who try to sell stuff to Netflix, and especially now that Netflix wants to spend $8 billion in 2018, everybody's like, hey, give me a piece of that, including myself, to be honest. But it's very, very hard to get into Netflix. And the other problem then is, you get into Netflix, and Netflix says, yes, this is a great idea, we like it, but then they own it. Netflix, from what I hear, they're not doing any middle deals. It's either a licensing situation, so they basically just license your show for like 2 years, or like whatever, your movie, whatever. It's most of the times it's movies. Like they license them for 2 years, and you pretty much get nothing for it, or you get very little for it. I've heard of deals that were as little as like a few $100. Going to the average of maybe about $2,500 for 2 years, and if you have a little more pull, you could probably get like a few $100,000 in the very, very best case, but I doubt they're paying any more than that. And if Netflix actually gets involved in the production, they own it lock, stock, and barrel. So is that something I really want to do? I want to sell something to Netflix for something, because I'm not like a huge name. I'm not like, George R.R. Martin or something like that. I don't have a lot of pull. My pull is basically my capability of creating a product, but my name, nobody's going to watch it because of my name. They're going to watch it because they think, oh, that's a neat idea, this is well done, whatever. But when I go to Netflix, they say, David, who are you? So I don't have any pull, so they're going to say, oh, because you don't have any pull, yeah, your stuff maybe looks good, but, you're not going to, your name is not going to sell the product. So I don't really have any pull, so I'm probably going to get whatever minimum they assume, you will get for production, but you lose it for all time. And not so sure that's something that I really want to deal with, basically. So the other possibility, of course, is you go with what's called an aggregator. An aggregator is somebody who has all the connections to the different streaming networks. Like there's distributors, Kino Nation, I think they're called Film Hub now, and there's maybe a half a dozen other ones who deal with less of the networks. And there's all kinds of situations, like for example, distributor, they're charging an upfront fee. For the encoding, and that can get quite expensive. It's about $1,500 for iTunes, maybe like another $1,000 for Amazon, and so on, blah blah blah. So it adds up. Kino Nation charges nothing, but they take 20% off the back end. So you have to like find out which is the best thing that works for you. With Amazon, you can actually go direct with Amazon. There is no problem with that. You can just upload it once you're technically proficient enough to do that, because Amazon, obviously, you're basically doing the encoding yourself. So it's not that easy, and you have to know a little bit about how things you can do. But of course, you can upload it to Amazon, and you could charge money right away. You can be on Amazon Prime. And Amazon is the second largest network in the world next to YouTube. So you got a good possibility of actually making some money. And of course, then there's always the YouTube distribution situation, where you make maybe a little bit of the advertisement thing. It's probably not going to be much, but you're definitely going to reach a large audience. And so, of course, that's the question. Then, do you want to reach the largest possible audience and maybe make no money in the beginning and say, okay, good, I'm just going to build this up? Or you want to say, okay, good, and I'm going to put it on Amazon, and I'm going to charge $2.99, a small nominal fee per episode, and yeah, well then that's the entry barrier. So at the end of the day, people not going to get to see it unless they pay the $2.99. But if people never seen your project, basically, or your product, maybe they're not going to spend the $2.99. So you see, there's a lot of things basically that you have to think about. But distribution is definitely something that has to be solved at some point. Because quite frankly, I mean, what good is a product going to do if nobody can see it? Distribution is the number one most important thing, basically. So those are some of the points why I think it is possible to do this. Of course, the proof's in the pudding, as they say so nicely. Put up and shut up. And but on the other hand, we also live in a social media age, so I can't shut up. I'm obviously gonna have to propagate my show. We have a website coming. The website's actually in the works. We have a landing page right now. From the landing page, you can also go to the various social media things that are already quite running. Yeah, I'll link below to the social media stuff. Especially Instagram has been very interesting. There's some interesting discussions starting there, and plus some really nice artwork maybe that will not be on a website and not be on Facebook. So please check it out, and I would appreciate it if you subscribe to this channel. There's more to come. Like I said, this is the very, very beginning of it, basically. So I have practically 0 subscribers. Well, maybe a few. I mean, I don't know, but it's not many, basically, because the crossover to some of the other projects that I'm currently working on is very low. But you can search my name, and you can instantly find out what else I've been doing. And but I'll talk about that in the animation thing, about some of my background. And yes, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.